Okay, here we are, ready to go. Good afternoon. Lovely day for it. I bet you're pleased to be indoors and not walking to Sage this afternoon out in that horrible weather. Just before I introduce Nigel, I just want to catch up on a couple of announcements. I always feel I should be standing on a chair when I'm making these announcements because that's how it used to be during the tea break, but hey ho. Just coming back to the Desert Island discs that I've spoken about over the last few weeks. Really great that we've had quite a number of people who are willing to come forward with the disc that has some meaning to them. We've got all that information and we've had so many applicants that we are now able to do 2 sessions. So our original session was going to be, I think, on the 20th of October, and we're still going to do one on the 20th of October. But with Brian's help, we're going to do an additional session, or the first session will now be on the 22nd of September. Marlene will be sending out the September program soon. It's another 5-week program full of goodies. But on the 22nd of September, we have our first Desert Island discs. So what Marlene will do, as soon as we've agreed the program with Brian, is to write out to those people who will be featured on the 22nd of September, so that you're ready and waiting and ready with your little speeches and to introduce your music. So we look forward to that. And as I say, Marlene will write out to you with the September program within the next week or so. Okay, on to today's program. Really pleased to welcome back Nigel Rothband. Sorry, there's somebody who should be on silent who isn't. Thank you. Delighted to welcome back Nigel. Nigel has been to Sage more than once to talk about mainly his experience in the retail industry. Today we have a different presentation from Nigel. Nigel is going to be talking about My Dad, My Hero. He's been talking about the life of his father, Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey W. Rothband, TD. Geoffrey will actually be 100 years old this week. We wish him happy birthday, Nigel. Geoffrey was born in Manchester on August the 21st, 1920, and saw action in Burma, East Africa, and was evacuated from Dunkirk during the Second World War. So I'm sure we've got some interesting tales to tell. Nigel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart, very much. And I feel quite emotional. I have to say, I'm an emotional person anyway, so forgive me if emotion gets the better of me. I'm talking about my dad, yeah, Geoffrey Rothband. And to help me do that, I'm going to try and share my video. So just bear with me a second while I share my screen with you, if I can. So many of you will know my dad, recognise my dad. He was born in Manchester, in Withington, Didsbury, South Manchester, on August the 21st, 1920, 100 years ago on Friday. And for those who don't know him, that's what he looks like, with his row of medals on his chest. I will talk about his war record with you. That is him. You might be wondering, what does TD stand for? Some of you may know. He was decorated with the TD, the Territorial Decoration, for his services to the Territorial Army. So that's what the TD stands for. Let me take you through his life, but interestingly, there's a bit of history in the family as well. There he is, in the early days in Manchester. And in fact, the little boots you can see on him, those little leather boots, I've still got those, which is amazing that we've got those, and we're going to make sure those are preserved and saved. This gentleman here, I'm going to start with a bit of family history first, because I think it's important to understand Dad's life. This is Henry Lesser Rothband, but to give him his full title, this is Sir Henry Lesser Rothband, BT, a baronet. So how come he got a baronetcy? This is my grandfather's brother. So this is my father's father was Baron Harold Rothband, and this is his brother, Sir Henry Lesser. And what happened was, he saw the disabled ex-servicemen coming back from the First World War, without limbs, without arms, being blinded, being severely disabled. And although he wasn't an MP, he lobbied his MP to get through Parliament the law that eventually was all about the employment of disabled people, which still stands there today. So Henry saw these disabled servicemen coming back, and eventually managed to get a law in Parliament that certain companies had to employ a certain percentage of disabled ex-servicemen. And in fact, it was known as the Rothband scheme for many, many years. And here it is, it's about the employment for disabled soldiers and sailors, and a scheme for a national roll of employers. So this was set up, as I say, by my great uncle. And as a result of that, he became Sir Henry. Sadly, and I say sadly, his son predeceased him, which means that the baronetcy wasn't passed down. And of course, they never passed sideways either. It's always an issue that we had as a family. If it was, my father would have become Sir Geoffrey, and on his death, my brother would have been Sir David, and I would have been the Honourable Nigel Rothband. But I probably don't need that, so it's probably a good thing in the end that that never happened. But sadly, that baronetcy died because his son Percy sadly predeceased him. So we are a very, very long established Manchester Jewish family, and to give you, I'm sorry, there's Sir Henry's crest, which I'm sharing with you as well. So the Fides Servanda Est means faith must be preserved was his crest. And I'm not an expert in heraldry, but I do have that on vellum and gold leaf done by someone who's an expert in these things. I do know all the different things, what they mean. There's some red roses there, the red rose of Lancaster, of course, being a Manchester family, and other things which I suppose we could go into, but I guess we haven't got time. But that's the Rothband crest, that's Sir Henry's crest. Let me just give you a bit of family history. So again, many of you will know my two boys, Jack and Harry. I'm going to give you the history, tell you how long the family goes back to England. People talk about my dad being more English than the English. I can see a number of faces on here I recognise. Sorry to pick you out, Ronnie, but I know that you always describe as being more English than the English, as many others do. So there's myself. So there's my dad. That's a bit more what he looks like today. So that's the boy's grandfather. His father, who I talked about, there he is. There's Baron Rothband, the boy's great-grandfather, also born in England. His father was, sorry, I beg your pardon, his wife's father. So we skip from my father's father to my father's mother. And her father was Ben Franks. So that's the boy's great-grandfather. His father was Joseph Franks. That's the boy's great-great-grandfather. And we can even go back as far as that as well. So that shows you how far we go back in England to kind of literally the 1800s. A very, very long established English family. And that certainly those of you who've met my father will know how English he is as well. And I'll come up with some examples as we go through. Sadly, that we have had sort of sadnesses through the years as well. And of course, being a military family and being around during the First World War, this is Captain Jack Eustace Rothband, who was killed at the Somme at the tender age of 37 in July 1916. And this was again another brother of my grandfather. So my father's uncle, Jack Rothband, and my son Jack was named after him. That's the crest of the Manchester Regiment. So you can see there's a little bit of history here in this family, very much English based, very much Manchester based as well. And my dad went to visit the grave with my sister's son Oliver a number of years there. They are actually at that grave, very obviously buried alongside with crosses and of course the Magen David there for my great uncle Jack Rothband. He went to school at Oundle, which is a public school near Peterborough. No surprise there that he went to a public school with the kind of the very English background that he's had. Some of you may be able to spot him. I'll help you out here. As you look at the picture, he's crouching bottom left. So that's my dad, literally aged 15 at school at Oundle. I'll just tell you at this point, how did I get hold of this photo? At the end, I'll tell you what we're doing for his 100th birthday on Friday. And one of the things we're doing is producing a book of messages and photographs. And when I wrote to the school, they were quite fantastic. They sent me 5 or 6 photographs of him in sports teams, debating societies, quotes from him all those years back in the 1930s. And they sent a beautiful personal letter, and this is one of the photos. So I don't think Dad's probably never seen this photo before, and it'd be interesting to know how many of those people he can name. So here's another of the photos again. So he is top right on the back row on the very far right. He's a very keen cricketer like I am. He taught me my cricket in the back garden, fanatical cricket and football fan, and a golfer as well. So this is 1936, ladies and gentlemen. And they look like historical photos. It is a historical photo. And there's my dad, the Oundle first 11 cricket team in 1936. And there he is standing far right, top row. We've talked about his army career, and of course he was 18 when war broke out, and the cap badge that you can see there is the Lancashire Fusiliers, and this is him looking very smart and very handsome as war broke out. I'm going to just read some bits actually from the screen because his war record is really quite interesting, and forgive me for reading this, but I just don't want to miss anything out. He enlisted with the Lancashire Fusiliers in 1938, and his father before him had commanded the 5th Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers as well before him. So his father saw action in the First World War. As we saw earlier, we lost one of his brothers at the Somme, so that his father saw action, and he signed up in 1938, was commissioned shortly afterwards, and he joined the Lancashire Fusiliers in early 1940 as part of the British Expeditionary Force, and the battalion embarked at Southampton for Cherbourg, and following the Battle of Dunkirk he was evacuated from the beaches. So this is real history, and what was interesting, some of you may have seen the film Dunkirk, and of course my dad went to see the film Dunkirk, and I'm pretty sure he was the only person in the cinema who actually was there. And we asked him the question, we said, okay, Dad, two things here. You were there, you were actually at Dunkirk and you've now seen the film. Help us understand one thing that was really realistic, that was kind of, yes, they actually recreated that perfectly, and something that actually was kind of a bit pie in the sky and just for the film. And interesting, the thing he said that was most like was he was taken out in a rowing boat from the beaches and he was hauled up the side of a destroyer that was in the bay with kind of this rope netting over the side, and he scrambled up the rope netting, and he said that's exactly how it was depicted in the film. And I said, what about something that was not like it? And he said, well, in the film you saw lots and lots of sand, but actually there at Dunkirk on those beaches there was no sand, there was only people as far as the eye can see. So there's just a couple of examples of him being there, and so if you see the film, think about the destroyer. And he tells the story also, Dad, that he got into the destroyer, he got into this rowing boat, they rowed out, they clambered up the side of this destroyer, he was hauled in through his pants, and he realised he'd left his rifle in the boat. And he said to the bloke who was helping him up, he said, excuse me, I've just left my rifle. And the way my dad always describes it, he says, please leave your rifle in the rowing boat, or words to that effect. So you can make your own mind up exactly what the words were. But that's that. So that was Dunkirk. He left, so he went back to England. He then left England again in 1940, and he joined the East Africa Command, and he fought the Italians. I need to bring this up. He fought the Italians in Ethiopia. In 1942 via Madagascar, where he saw action against the Vichy French army. And he was moved to Ceylon, as it was in those days, and Burma, with the King's African Rifles. So the King's African Rifles were, he was a white British officer, and they worked with black soldiers. And Dad tells lots and lots of stories about one of my favourites. My father was giving one of his soldiers a hard time, and he turned around to my dad and said, you think I know bugger nothing, but I know bugger all. One of his favourite expressions. So in Burma, he doesn't like the Japanese very much, it's fair to say. Let's leave it there. The sort of the way they fought the war, what they did with our prisoners of war, he disliked the Japanese. And originally, some of you might have thought I was going to actually be interviewing Dad on this, and I think that was my original intention. But of course, it's very difficult at 100 almost. There are some days where he just can chat for England, and other days where he just wants to have a bit of a schluff and is maybe less likely. So I didn't want to take the risk. However, a bit later on, I've actually captured some footage taken last week of him sitting at our kitchen table, just chatting about hand-to-hand fighting with the Japanese. So I am going to show you that 6-minute video in a moment as well, so you can actually hear him talking. So he says that he was very lucky to get out of Burma. He said, well, I'll let him tell you about it a bit later, but he was involved in hand-to-hand fighting with the Japanese. And it was tough conditions. He caught malaria as well and was ill with malaria. And I say, did well to get out the war. And he came back to England in 1945 and rejoined the Lancashire Fusiliers. And he became ultimately in 1962 the commanding officer of the 5th Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers, like his father before him. So a very distinguished army career, and I'll tell you a little story about that later on with a slide to help me do that. So yeah, so that was his war. I've kind of gone through that quite quickly, but saw a lot of action, and you saw his medals as well, of course, on his chest, which basically were given to him following the various campaigns that he was involved in. I'll obviously take some questions at the end. I'm keen to leave some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. Very keen sportsman. This is the Manchester Country Club. He's sitting right in the middle with the cap on as the wicketkeeper. And some of these guys were his best mates and spent time with them. So he was a very keen cricketer. He married my mum in 1953 in Manchester. My mum was born in Salford, Margaret Tyler. Beautiful bouquet of lily of the valley. She was a model, or a mannequin as they called them in those days. And they are a great examples of opposites attracting. Dad was this formal, very straight, very British army officer, and my mum was this vivacious young model, and it just worked. The combination was just fantastic, and they had a wonderful marriage. Sadly, my mum died 8 years ago with a heart condition, and of course it's not what was planned. You know, as far as Dad was concerned, he married a girl 15 years younger than him, and he was going to go first, but it just doesn't always work out the way you want, and he's completely devastated by her death, and talks about her every day. They had 3 children, 2 gorgeous children, and me in the middle. My eldest brother David was born 3 years before me. I'm the one in the middle, and that's my little sister, who's in her 50s. But it's a great, lovely family picture. So many of you will have those photos yourselves, I guess, from your own childhoods, indeed your own children potentially as well. So a really happy childhood, growing up in Manchester, living in Manchester, and that was us. We lived in Northenden in South Manchester, and that's really where Dad has lived the whole of his life. He continued, as I said, with the Lancashire Fusiliers, and this is a picture. It's a very, probably you can't see this on your screen particularly, but Dad is in the front row, second from the left, with a very bald head. So that's Dad. He was a major at this particular time. This is in the 1950s, when we were small children, and this was just before he commanded the battalion. He was only a major at this point, but it's always been a big part of our lives. So this is something I wanted to share with you, and Dad's not in this picture, so don't try and find him, he's not there. But this is the first time I remember seeing my father crying. And he's a very proud Mancunian, he's a very proud Jew, and he's a very proud Lancashire Fusiliers. And the Lancashire Fusiliers had a yellow hackle, the feather in the front of your beret. So a number of these old boys you can see have got the yellow hackle. And the officers' mess was in Bury. And I remember we went to an event. I was a very small boy. And this event was when the Lancashire Fusiliers was being disbanded and being amalgamated into the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. And the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers have red and white hackles. And I remember it distinctly. The band were playing, and a man in uniform went down the ranks with a massive silver salver. And the soldiers were taking their yellow hackles out and placing them on the silver salver as they went away. I'm going to get upset now myself as well. And another soldier came with the red and white hackles, and the soldiers took them off and replaced them in their berets. And I looked at my father, and tears were rolling down his face, because his regiment was being disbanded. The regiment he commanded, the 5th Battalion, the regiment his father commanded before him. And it's the first time I remember seeing my father cry properly. The business he was in was founded by my great-grandfather, W.S. Rothband and Company. And they manufactured X-ray protective clothing. So the big, heavy lead coats you might remember seeing when you have an X-ray. They made arm guards, all sorts of things. And it was founded by my great-grandfather. Then my grandfather took over, and then my father took over. And if you go and have an X-ray, and a few years ago, my father needed a chest X-ray, and I took him. And he said, "Excuse me, where did you get your X-ray protective clothing from?" And the radiographer said, as if, "Well, where else?" "Well, Rothband's." And he put and as you can see, can you see what it says on the apron? It actually says Rothband. There's our company logo, and there's my dad smiling. And of course, she hadn't made the connection. She checked the papers, and she went, "Oh my word." And so the company is still going today. My father sold the business. People always ask me, why didn't I go into the business? Well, he hated it when his father was running the business and didn't really encourage us. I took a different route, and some of you sage people have heard of my retail career. My brother did a building degree and went a different route, and my sister was a girl, so they don't go into business as far as my father's concerned. So he sold it. He sold the business, and it's run actually still within the family. My cousin's husband ran the business. He's then sold it on, and we're still in touch. And I just thought that's a nice picture. It's a good picture of Dad anyway, but of course it's got the Rothband logo on the apron. What's next? I talked about him. I think I might have shown this at a previous Sage event that we've been at. And those of you who've met my dad will know he's very, very English and not very Jewish. You know, he wears his talus like a scarf. It's just a bit Jewish wearing it all open up and flipped over. He wears it like a scarf. And I grew up not really knowing or using many of these words you can see on the screen. We used other ones. So you could probably work them out for yourself. So if I said to you, Dad never says Shabbat, what does he say? It's Saturday as far as he wouldn't use the word Shabbat. It's a Saturday. Shul is not shul. He doesn't use that word. Are we going to synagogue today? Yeah. Cheder, we didn't go to Cheder. No, we went to Hebrew classes. It's not a Siddur. What is it? Anybody got any ideas? I know you're all muted. You can't answer us. I'll tell you anyway. It's a prayer book. It's never Pesach. It's always Passover. And this is the great one, Yom Kippur. You know what's coming next. It's the Day of Atonement. Never heard him call it Yom Kippur ever. Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, it's New Year's Day as far as my father's concerned. And he was once honoured, not with a Chatan Bereshit or Chatan Torah. What was he? He was a bridegroom of the law. And Musaf is the additional service. Just a few examples of the very English man that I grew up with. So when I kind of moved out of home and I met Nicole, my wife, and you know, I used to call it Day of Atonement and New Year's Day, and she thought I was mad. I've learned a whole new language. There we are. I said before that literally last week, and he needed a haircut, so he won't thank me for this, but his hair's a bit long and he won't like that. We talked about first-hand account of him fighting the Japanese in Burma. So I don't know if you can turn your volumes up if you've got them, because this is about a 6-minute video of Dad sitting at our dining room table. I just want you to think about the fact this is a man who is almost 100 years old, who lived his whole life in Manchester, talking about his experience in Burma. So I'm just going to play this for you now. It's about 6 minutes long. Were there any other situations like that where you felt in danger?
Oh, yes, sure.
So what were the other situations where you felt?
For meeting a number of the Jacks in the jungle as who were advancing on them onto their little positions.
How did you know they were there?
How did
you know they were there?
they shot at us?
Right.
they shot, but they weren't very good shots.
They weren't.
No.
I was lucky.
Yeah.
Good job. I was right to get hit on the tail.
So were you involved in hand-to-hand fighting then at that point with the Japanese in Burma?
Yes. Yeah. Night time, particularly, once or twice. We stopped in our circle position. And the other company were next door to us, and behind us. And yes, as we advanced, we stopped and taken up our positions, and out of the jungle in front, were the Japs. And when they heard us, for you can't stop British or African or Indian troops making a noise. A Gurkha battalion, you probably could. And so they knew where we were by sound, and I distinctly heard what was saying.
I can't hear.
Shouting for us. Hello, Tommy. Tommy, where are you? And it was, hello, Tommy. Tommy, where are you? Like that. And the first time it happens, your head stood up on end. You can imagine. You're used to it. Dear. And we did, we had one or two attacks. We formed a line, not this secondary jungle, it wasn't very dense. No, so they happened to form a line in between the trees, and they'd advance. And they did. Yeah, they charged us. Well, I always had a rifle in it, to hell with a pistol. Waste of time. Have a rifle, stick a bayonet on the end of it, and use it. Or use it as a club. And I had Ochagoro was here. Another African was on my left there. And another fellow out here called Astalesio. He was the brain gunner. He was very good. And he'd be rattling away with his brain gun. And two enemy arrived at me. I don't know why at me. They'd been hit. And the momentum took them right into me. And I didn't know what to do. I just pulled a couple of rounds into both of them. And we sat and waited. And we'd obviously stop them, and they'd gone. One of the ran killed. When dawn came, they were dead as doornails. And one of them was an officer, which is unusual. And they were very well fed, this lot that attacked us. We were told that they weren't very well fed. They wanted to grab our food. They were very smart looking, dressed fellow, dead. We took in the papers and just send them back to the battalion. Intelligence officer.
So there you go. I've got a few more like that we're trying to, every time he wants to talk about it, we just try and get the iPhone up as quickly as possible to record it. He's going to be 100 on Friday, and he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need another pair of socks or a new belt or a tie or anything like that. And what we decided to do as a family was just thinking of his background, the people he's met, the experiences that he's had. We've come up with an idea of a book, which is entitled 100 Messages for 100 Years. And we wrote to his old school I mentioned before to you, his regiment, societies, associations, Rabonim, friends, not that many of his friends of course are still around, but his friends' children who remember him, who maybe I'm friendly with, and people today currently he's made friends with in Bushy, and his current friends of today. And actually we've got about 114 messages, and he's not seen this, so you're very fortunate. I'm going to get out the book now, which arrived yesterday. So here is the book. And I'll just give you on the back, we did the timeline, which some of the photos I've shared with you already. You won't be able to see very much, but there's a timeline on the back there. But there are some wonderful messages. For example, I'll just share one or two with you just so you can see. So the colonel of his regiment is some bloke called the Duke of Kent, and he sent a personal message to my dad, dear Colonel Rothband. We've also got some other bloke here, which some of you might have heard of as well. He sent one as well to dear Colonel Rothband, another military chap who's the head of army recruitment, and so on and so on. So it's a really wonderful thing. And just another one. I don't know if you watch the Festival of Remembrance, the Royal Albert Hall every Remembrance Sunday or on the Saturday night. The Bishop of Manchester always held those services, and Bishop Nigel McCulloch has very kindly worked with my father and very kindly sent a message. Just some examples of some of the great people who have sent my dad messages on his 100th birthday. And what are we going to do? Well, in these difficult times, we were meant to be having a Kiddush and Shul. We were meant to be having a wonderful Friday night dinner, but we can't do that. So on Friday afternoon, the plan is at the moment to have a socially distanced tea party with families keeping to themselves on their own tables, and we're having it catered, and hopefully, weather permitting, we'll be able to get together. He's a very proud family man. He's amazed that he's still above ground, as he says. Can't quite believe it, but he's fit and well. Not only did he beat malaria, pneumonia, believe it or not, I think I said in the words in introducing this particular presentation, he got coronavirus. He had a heart problem and was admitted to hospital aged 99, was refused to have a pacemaker, didn't want all the fuss, so they sent him home. He had another episode, and this time when he went back in, they tested him on admission to find that he picked up the virus. So he came back to us because my sister's shielding at the moment. Back in April, he came back to us, having had a pacemaker fitted with coronavirus and a chest infection. So he was a bit poorly, but amazingly and remarkably, he's made a full recovery. We go for walks every day. He enjoys watching Manchester City. He enjoys watching cricket and golf and spending time with his family. And we're very proud of him. And probably the nicest thing of a lot is that a few months ago, his granddaughter gave birth to little Violet. So he's a great granddad as well. And that gives him a huge amount of joy and pleasure. And she's growing up, and she lives in London. So whilst he's been staying with us, they have been to see him a couple of times, and he loves her very much. So there's his new great-grandchild, Violet. Listen, it's probably best, I've got one eye on the clock here. I think it's probably only fair, Stuart, that I leave time. There must be some questions from people. I don't know how you handle this now via Zoom, but I'll hand back to you, Stuart. Can't hear you, Stuart, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, I'll just wait for Ronnie to get me up on the screen. But meanwhile, let me speak. Nigel, thank you for that extremely interesting story. We hear many interesting stories over the speakers that we have, and this is a completely different angle that we haven't had before. Now, clearly you come from good stock, Nigel, I can see that. You've got a good inheritance there, good background, but a wonderful story and how your dad has survived through some very difficult times. So if you like, I'll go with the first question, because last week was VJ Day, and I watched the service that was done from Horse Guards Parade on Saturday evening, and actually there was a number of people there who were caught up in Burma and placed Singapore. Soldiers must be sort of around your dad's age, and they told some horrific stories about the treatment of the British soldiers and other soldiers who were prisoners of the Japanese. So did your dad watch that at all? Did he get any sort of thing from that?
It's really interesting. Excuse me, he's funny about these things. Very often with these things, he kind of, I've seen it all before. But instantly on the stuff on VJ Day, which we also watched on Saturday evening as well, he actually quite enjoyed it, because they were talking about him. They were absolutely talking about his war. They were talking about his experiences. They were talking about people catching malaria. They were talking about the way the Japanese fought, the fact that it was really dense, difficult jungle. And they actually were talking to him. And kind of, I watched him quite a lot, and he was kind of smiling to himself. And recognising the fact that that was absolutely him. So if you saw that, Stuart, that's exactly what Dad went through, 100%. Yeah,
it was absolutely amazing, because you could feel the strength of their feelings about the treatment that the soldiers got out there from the Japanese. I think they talked about the Burma Railway that cost 400 lives per mile. Just, unthinkable in terms of what you've been treating another. But
He's not keen on the Nazis, it's fair to say, but I suspect he hates, and I'm using the word advisedly, he hates the Japanese even more, for all the reasons you've just given. Yeah, he really does. He has a major problem. Yeah.
Okay, so let me now open this up to other people. Ronnie, can you sort of get the screen up for us, please?
Nigel needs to close down that page, I think.
Okay. Right, so can we see other people now, please, Ronnie?
See other people?
Well, just get them up on the screen so I can see them. Go back to, take it off me.
Take it off. Okay.
Meanwhile, if there are other people there who would like to ask questions, just unmute yourself and just speak up.
Can I just ask a silly question, perhaps, to Nigel? Your father and you were both born and brought up in Manchester. I don't think I detected any accent.
It's a great question, Ronnie, and thank you for that, because I implied that when I said, listen to this, here's a 99.9-year-old man who spent all his life in Manchester, and he speaks the Queen's English. And there is a reason for that. I mean, his father before him was exactly the same, also born in Manchester. Baron was also born in Manchester. And I think certainly as a small boy, every time I came home from school and said bath, my father would say bath. And every time I said grass, he'd say grass. And I think it's just the way I was taught to speak. I spent a bit more time in London, as you know, and the odd word comes out. But my father has, until April this year, and apart from between 1940 and 1945, he spent all his time in Manchester. And that's how he speaks, because he was, and when people say to him, face to face, you don't sound like a Mancunian. So we don't all come from Coronation Street, you know. So yeah, that's the way he's always spoken. That's why I think that's why I speak like I do, because that's what I was told. That's how I was told to speak.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
Anybody else there?
Is it possible that his attendance at public school had something to do with the way in which he enunciates his words?
Possibly. I'm sure that was reinforced there, but it would have been his own father in his own home, the same way I was. I was also public school educated, as you'd imagine, with the sort of background I've just given you. But I think it was home that did that, because I didn't go away to school till after my bar mitzvah, till I was 13. So it was by the time you're 13, you know how to speak, and it was right the way through from coming back from primary school and prep school. It was drummed into me, not just that, but about polishing your shoes and good table manners and good dress sense and all of that stuff. It was all huge, and still today is really, really important to him.
Good.
Hello, could I ask you a question? Thank you so much, Nigel. It's Marion Offenbach here.
Hi, Marion.
Hi. Fascinating story. You must all be so proud.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when you said about your dad didn't say any of the normal words like shul and Yom Kippur and things like that, what did he call a kiddush?
Didn't have one.
It's a great question.
It's a good question, isn't it?
It's a great
And
question.
what about a bar mitzvah? Because you mentioned before you're having a family tea.
No. But to be fair, bar mitzvah was bar mitzvah. No, that wasn't bar mitzvah. Yeah, it wasn't a confirmation or anything like that. I think we've got people raising their hands.
So it was a kiddush still.
I think that probably was kiddush, because it's difficult. Isn't it? What the reception? It was. I think that was a kiddush. There were some. I picked the ones that he wouldn't have said. Yeah, I think it was. A
Thank
kiddush.
you. Wish him a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I will.
Thank you, Nigel.
Hello.
Nigel, this is Shirley.
Yes.
Did
Hello.
anti-Semitism ever come into it?
It's a good question. Another great question. And he says no. I think his nickname at school was Rabbi, but if you were ginger, you were ginger. If you were spotty, you were spotty. If you were fat, you were fat. If you were thin, you were thin. Is kind of how he would put it. So you all had something to call you, and therefore he was Rabbi. He would say no. He never really found any anti-Semitism, but he's never been overtly Jewish. He's deliberately been the other way around. Not that he's ever denied being Jewish. But he, as I say, I talked to you about the tallis being worn as a scarf, and he doesn't necessarily. Here's another example. Whenever we came out of shul, we had to take our kippot off immediately because it was a bit Jewish. And it's fine having them on in there, but once we're out there, they've got to come off because we're now British and we're English, and we must fit in with this Christian country. This is a Christian country. You just reminded me, Shirley, actually, of another thing that if I've got time to share with you, that he complained. You'll like this. He rang to complain when a Hanukkah or a menorah was placed on a roundabout in South Manchester, because he felt quite strongly this is a Christian country. And therefore, we can have menorahs and we can have Hanukkah, but in our own homes. They shouldn't be sort of out there in the public. He was not happy about it at all. How's that one for you?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We do not need to thrust our religion down the throats of other people.
That's his view. You should meet him and shake hands when you can. He absolutely would agree with you 100%. It's for us to celebrate in our own homes, and as you say, it's a Christian country. We shouldn't be ramming it down other people's throats. His words precisely.
Yeah.
I think I can see that Sue Gill has got her hand raised. Sue, do you still want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
I can,
Yes.
yes.
Good. Hi. My family's also from Manchester. And my uncle Basil Tupkin, he was in Burma. He was born in 1922. Sadly, he died of leukemia, which is why I raised money for Blood Cancer UK. But he died when he was only 51. But I wondered if your dad knew him. And that my cousin Vivian lived in Northampton as well.
And just give me the names again, Sue, sorry. So Basil
Tupkin, Toubkin.
Okay, we can ask that question. I might, while you're all on, I might just run out and get someone to run down that. And who else did you say?
My uncle was in Burma, you know, but he never spoke about it.
That's
never.
interesting.
And they say he died when he was only 51. He came out to Israel with me as well.
Well, interesting. Dad's never been to Israel, and won't go, of course, because those terrorists murdered his British Army colleagues, of course, which is another spin on the. Not that everybody would agree with that. You can put your hand down now, Sue, as well.
All right, I will do that.
Can I ask you something, Nigel? It's Nova. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, Nova.
Yeah. My father spent 3 years in the trenches in the First World War. I've got his regiment, and he was wounded, and I've got pictures in a field hospital. How do I find something out? I can't find anything out about him. I've got he was in one regiment. He got wounded. He came out, went to another one. He spent 3 years in the Somme, in the trenches. I can't get any information. I have no medals, nothing.
Well, maybe we can should we pick this up outside of the? I've got your number, Nova. Maybe what we'll do, let's pick up outside of this particular Zoom call.
Oh, that's lovely.
See if I can help.
Me. Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
I think Nova, you asked this question of somebody when we had a talk quite a while ago, and they did give you some information of where you can go to a central point.
I haven't got but I haven't got anything.
I'll leave it for Nigel. Leave it for Nigel to pick up with you separately after the meeting.
That'd be fine. Thank you. That's all I want.
Just going back to what Sue said as well earlier on about raising money. My dad has also said he doesn't want any presents at all, and one of the charities he supported throughout his life is the Soldiers' Charity. It used to be called the Army Benevolent Fund. And so he's asking people to make donations to that instead of giving presents. So I just checked it this morning, and he's raised £1,000. I'm not promoting it per se, but if anybody asks me the question, what does your dad want? I just say he doesn't want anything. But if you are looking to give him a present, then that's where you should go.
It's an amazing story to hear somebody articulate about Israel, isn't it? I haven't heard that before, that he won't go there because the British Army murdered his colleagues. But I understand his feelings.
Terrorists, Stuart.
Sorry?
They're terrorists.
Terrorists, yeah, okay. Did he have any reaction watching the programme Saturday night, listening to people who fought alongside him and their experiences? What was his feelings?
Yeah, we just talked about that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, he resonated with them and was nodding along in agreement. So absolutely, yes, very much so.
Yeah. Any more questions for Nigel? Go on.
Nigel, where are you, Nigel?
Where am I?
Yeah.
I'm at home.
Okay.
Who's that?
Barbara.
Oh, hello, Barbara.
Hi.
Okay. Any more questions? Who is that? Somebody's got their hand up there. Wasn't Barbara. Somebody else I saw.
Can I speak? I'm Stanley Goldie.
Hello, Mr. Goldie.
Oh, this is our neighbour.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello, Mr. Goldie, sir. I need to stand up. Sorry.
Can you see me?
Yes, go on.
Yes, Stanley, go ahead.
Right. Now, I've known your father for a number of years because I used to live in Manchester. Used to see him at a discussion group.
Yeah.
And every time...
look.
Sorry?
Sorry?
Go on, carry on, carry on.
All right. Every time he spoke sense. Now, I would love to be the same condition mentally as your father is at the moment. I think he's a wonderful man. He's a very nice man. Please give him my best wishes and my wife's best wishes for his 100th birthday.
Thank you so very much. Well, as you know, he's also very fond of you as well, and enjoys every time he meets you both. And that will be well received. Thank you, Stanley, very much.
Okay, bye.
Hillary, you wanted to come in, but take yourself off mute.
I can't see who. Well, that's our neighbour. Good.
Right, sorry.
Go on, Hillary.
I so enjoyed your talk.
Hillary,
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say greetings from Ali and Louis Sharon.
That's very sweet. Thank you so much.
I told them that I was going to be listening to you.
Amazing,
That's
man.
really lovely. Thank you so much. Send them my love as well. Thank you very much.
Will do. And Mazel tov on your dad. Even if he doesn't use Yiddish words, Mazel tov on his birthday.
I'll say congratulations, probably, if you understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Any more questions for Nigel? No?
Nigel, I don't have a question. This is Jeffrey Zemmel, Daphne's husband. May I say, I think it's the most incredible story, and thank you very much, obviously, for giving us an opportunity to hear it. May he have a wonderful birthday, and may he live long enough to see Manchester City win the Champions League. Please God, he's going to be with us for about another 50 years.
Maybe, and the rest.
Jeffrey, I was really trying to avoid football, and I didn't think Nigel really wanted to get onto that subject, so I don't think
I'm very happy, very happy.
Nigel, thank you so much for that. It's been a very interesting session for us. I repeat Jeffrey's words. We wish your dad well. I hope he has a wonderful birthday, and please God, many more happy years with the family and his great-grandchildren and his grandchildren and his children. So I hope the weather's kind to you on Friday, so you can celebrate properly.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Okay, just before we close, just to remind you, next week we have Judge Shlomo Kreiman. He's going to be looking back at his 20 years on the bench as an
22, not 20.
No, it says 20 on my sheet. Obviously,
Don't you undersell me. I'll have you in contempt.
Okay. Okay, this must have been typed 2 years ago, so it's 22 years. Jeffrey, we look forward to
Nigel.
Jeffrey. Shlomo, we look forward to you next week, and we will see you all then. Have a good week all. Take care.
Thank you.